So recently I decided to try out Vindictus Defying Fate. It's an online action RPG and right now it's going through its alpha test. The game is still in development, but I thought it would be interesting to see what this new version of Vindictus is offering. Vindictus is an old MMORPG from 2010, coming from Nexon and developed by DevCat. I'm really not even too sure what Defying Fate is, whether or not it's a prequel or a sequel or a reboot. I think a lot of people in the community are also as equally confused as to what this is. But the release of this has brought on quite a bit of nostalgia for me, because back in the day, I used to be a bit of a fan of Nexon, looking at Dragon's Nest and MapleStory. And I vividly remember when Vindictus launched in 2010, showcasing incredibly flashy combat for an online game. Being that it was free to play, I was eager to play this, but my computer was never powerful enough to actually run it. Now, while the interest towards Vindictus has been quickly dwindling due to a number of issues like insane microtransactions that are not surprising because this is coming from Nexon, an incredibly grindy endgame, people have praised this game over the years for having a pretty decent story and one of the best real-time action combat systems found in an online game. This game is actually part of the Mabinogi universe. For those that don't know, this is an incredibly popular Nexon MMO that still to this day is running. It released back in 2004. This game in fact is actually a prequel to Mabinogi, and over in South Korea it's officially known as Mabinogi Heroes, though known as Vindictus in all other parts of the world. Now it is important to know that the original Vindictus, while it is technically labeled as an MMORPG, it really isn't considered, at least by most of the community, to be an MMORPG. The game has the shared centralized hub where you'll come across other players, but the core of Vindictus is going into instanced dungeons, and you can take this gameplay on either solo or with other players. This game is really more so just solo orientated, with multiplayer features tacked on if you want to engage in that. And Defying Fate here is no different. It's very much the same concept, although Nexon have mentioned that they're wanting to make Defying Fate even more solo focused than what's offered in the original game. So this is not open world by any means. There's no shared overworlds, and most of the time you're going to be engaging in combat simply by yourself. Vindictus really is a light dungeon crawler with hack and slash combat. So the question is, in its current state, is the new version of Vindictus a decent enough online action RPG? Is it worth playing? So in the alpha test here, we've got 4 different classes to choose from. The great sword wielding baddie, the quick attacking stabby man, shield woman with stick, and pillar man. Yeah, quite literally, this guy uses a big slab of concrete to attack with. Genius. Now for research purposes, I decided to go with the greatsword wielding baddie. No real particular reason other than, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Vindictus Defying Fate. Or should I say, Vindictus Defying Bra? Because apparently in this universe, the bra technology was never invented. Oh yeah, for sure. No, this department has not changed in the slightest compared to the original game. This is definitely still Vindictus. However, in this version, as you can see, we've got the 2025 physics technology. So one thing you should know about this game, or really any Eastern online MMORPG, is there is going to be some level of sexualization going on. Yeah, these games are notorious for their female character designs, and it's been that way since the dawn of time. The main reason for this is because it generates money. The original game has a lot of looty outfits that you can equip onto your character, specifically looking at the female characters. And most of these outfits are tied to a cash shop. Now, one thing that you can absolutely guarantee in an Eastern online game is the cash shop breaking all level of immersion. And it is no different here in Defying Fate. The world of Vindictus is supposed to be positioned in dark fantasy, influenced by Celtic mythology. Yet for some reason, we can wear a sexy nurse's outfit. However, this is a pretty normalized thing when it comes to these Eastern online games, so it's sort of a case of, well, if you can't beat them, you may as well join them. Now, it is important to mention that for the alpha here, there is no cash shop, there's no MTX whatsoever, but I am almost dead on the money that this page right here will be a cash shop for the eventual full release. The game, like most these days, also sports a battle pass system, which is free to access here in the alpha test, but again, I would say that it's going to cost money in order to access it for the full game. So like the original game, Defying Fate offers a pretty in-depth character creator with sliders to change all different parts of your character's body. Yes, even including the breast slider. It is hair! I got no idea what kind of hormones they're pumping into those chickens in the world of Vindictus, but it's next level, I'm telling you. I've also never seen a video game character creator offer a skin shine slider, but apparently this is a thing. So if you want your character to look all oiled up and as if they've just been rolling around in the KFC deep fryer basket, then go hard to your heart's content. Now the most obvious change going on here in Defying Fate is most certainly to its visuals. The original game is looking pretty dated now and was originally developed on the Source engine, whereas Defying Fate here is an Unreal Engine 5 title. And I have to say that the game is actually honestly quite stunning in most cases. There's not a huge variety of locations that you get to explore throughout the alpha test. You have the main central hub area, a pretty classic mountainous, sort of cavernous, woodlands type space, and then you've got the snowy mountain region. But the environments look simply gorgeous, along with the character models as well. The hair tech that they got going on UE5 is pretty impressive, and it's all in full effect and in full use here in Defying Fate. However, it is worth noting that the optimization towards this game is not good in its current alpha state. Performance is really struggling. This is the most common complaint I'm currently seeing about the game, is just how bad it's currently running. There are minimal graphics settings as it currently stands, which is not really a good sign to see in your alpha test, so there's not a lot you can actually do in order to alleviate the issues. Really, the only way of having a smooth experience here is having some of the best PC hardware. Now personally, I didn't really run into too many problems other than some stuttering from time to time and one crash. I am playing everything pretty much maxed out here using DLSS for upscaling. However, I am running this on an RTX 5080 along with the Ryzen 9 9950X. Now the combat system has taken on quite a bit of evolution here. It's still an action RPG real-time combat system, though it's taking more of a Souls-like approach this time around, wanting to offer much more difficult combat encounters than the original experience. Now the game does have two difficulty options, easy and normal. That being said, I didn't really find the experience to be super challenging, though it is obvious that it is trying to be more challenging than the original game. There were indeed a couple of boss fights there that I died a few times on, where I had to sort of think about how I was approaching and not just mindlessly pressing and mashing the attack button. So the game now more so revolves around focusing in on enemy attack patterns, the typical stuff that you come to expect in Souls-like games. You've also got the attack indicators for dodgeable attacks, parable attacks, and undodgeable attacks. You're able to dodge, you're able to guard, you've got a light and heavy attack, and the combat system revolves around certain inputs mixed into combo strings between the light and heavy attacks. So kind of think Bayonetta, Devil May Cry, or your typical fighting game. Though as it currently stands in the alpha, the combo strings aren't really super complex. You've also got special abilities as well that can be accessed by holding down one of the triggers and pressing the corresponding button. There is no resource required in order to activate these, they simply just go on a cooldown. Now personally, I think that from what I've experienced of the few hours that I've played of this game, the combat system is pretty good, though it's very different, especially if you're coming from the original Vindictus. It still has that hack and slash DNA from the original game still intertwined into it, and it's not necessarily Souls-like heavy. You do have the typical bonfire system scattered throughout the dungeons that you get to explore, where you can rest, replenish your health, apply ability points, refill your healing flasks, and obviously respawning all enemies in the instance. So yes, there are definitely a lot of Soulsy elements here in Defying Fate. It's very obvious what Nexon have used as their source of inspiration for this new version of the game. But I think in its current state, at least as it stands, the combat system is a good enough start to see exactly what they're wanting to do here. It feels weighty and hefty and responsive enough. And while most of the initial encounters at the beginning of the game were pretty easy breezy, it was clear that the challenge started to ramp up as I was progressing. One of the big pieces of criticism towards the OG game is just how mindless and easy it is until you get to the very end point. But then you have this insane difficulty spike for the end game of the original Vindictus, where it just doesn't become fun to play anymore. Grind just gets so mundane, where most people don't get to even see the end of the original game because the game wants you to spend money in order to upgrade all of your stuff so that it's possible for you to actually progress to that conclusion. From my understanding at least, this is something that Nexon are going to have to take into account if they want people to stick around playing Defying Fate. Both enemies and bosses do have a stack meter, so we want to try fill that up to pull off a strong visceral attack. There's also a follower system which is new to Defying Fate. This allows you to have an NPC party member along with you while you're going through dungeons. They're honestly pretty useless most of the time, but they can tank some aggro, so that's kind of handy. But unfortunately, this is where the bad comes into play. The progression system is so bare bones and is so underwhelming. As you defeat enemies, you get XP and eventually you'll level up. You have a predetermined amount of points that just automatically increase as you level up. You're not putting points into certain stats or anything like that. It's just like, hey, you've leveled up, you're now a little bit stronger. Here's some additional strength stat and you've now got more HP. You don't get ability points or anything like that from leveling up. You actually find ability points via searching chests throughout dungeons, defeating a boss, or via the battle pass, which is not great unless the battle pass is actually intended to be free for the full game. Not a good sign that you're locking progression behind a paywall. Literally, the core of progression here in Vindictus is simply just the skill tree. Now, I'm sure this is not the full skill tree, but a lot of the nodes that you're unlocking here are so underwhelming. It's really minute stuff, like increasing your defense by 5 points, even though each level up I get, my defense already increases by 5 points, so why is this just a random node in the skill tree? Or reducing the cooldown of an ability by 5 seconds, even though that cooldown is 120 seconds. Well, initially it was exciting to unlock all of the active abilities. All of the other upgrades throughout the skill tree just felt so underwhelming. The only other thing, aside from the skill tree and basic leveling up here, that I can do in order to strengthen my character is upgrade your weapon, because there is no actual gear system here in Defying Fate, or at least yet, which is strange considering there was a gear system in the original game. Now, a lot of people actually dislike, and I mean heavily dislike, how the gear system works in OG Vindictus, and this might be why possibly Nexon are actually stepping away from a gear system. But right now, gear is purely cosmetic. You don't get gear via drops. The only kind of drops or things you're finding in dungeons are simply just crafting materials, and these crafting materials will either be used to upgrade your weapon or be required alongside ability points to unlock other ability nodes. And by the way, when you're upgrading your weapon, you're just simply upgrading your overall weapon stat. So right here, I unlock a new weapon and I upgrade it. The upgrade isn't specific, or the stats aren't specific or anything to that particular weapon. It's just upgrading an overall weapon stat. Anything equipable in the sense of gear is purely just cosmetic. And I have to say, I do like the whole dress 'em up cosmetic side of this game, because it is pretty in-depth. You can mix and match a whole bunch of different pieces and completely change the colors of a ton of different parts of that specific piece of gear. This does require a certain dye item which can be found out in dungeons. So if you're into the whole character customization thing, then there's a lot on offer here. But in my opinion, I think that progression is a little bit more important. It's one of the core aspects that motivates a player to continue playing a game. However, if we're looking in the story department, this was one thing that, kind of caught my attention. I think it's fine enough, and especially in the voice acting department, the voice acting here is pretty good for the most part. Not awkward, not terrible. Sometimes you can come across just absolutely awful dub from Eastern online games, and I think that Nexon have kind of nailed it here, so that's a good thing. I'm sort of interested in the story. The alpha only gives you access to about the first chapter of the story, which spans over 2 different dungeon regions. There's not really a whole lot to do in the alpha once you've wrapped up the story. You can return to a dungeon whenever you want and reverse any of the bosses that you fought along the way to get additional materials and XP. So while I'm not completely familiar with the original game, it seems as if dungeon farming is going to be a big thing, which again, I can imagine that it will get quite repetitious after a while. I also think Nexon need to do something about the dungeons as well. They are incredibly linear. There is basically no exploration whatsoever. You're pretty much just following a path. You'll come across a boss, you'll keep going forward versus another boss, and eventually reach the final boss. That is all there is to the dungeons here in this game. I was almost baffled to come across some environmental traps in dungeon number 2, because I couldn't believe it. They were actually trying to mix things up. If these dungeons are the core of the content, what you'll be doing most of the time, then I think it's sort of important that they figure out how to actually make them interesting and fun. If we're looking in the multiplayer department, there is a matchmaking system to verse 2 specific bosses here. You can take these guys on solo if you want, or you can matchmake. And yeah, you got that right. That's 4 half-naked anime waifus wailing on Demon Lord Scary Man. This is definitely Vindictus. I'm not really too sure if there's a way to do like cooperative play with a friend throughout the story missions that you're doing, and I think that is one thing that people are probably going to want, so I think it's quite important that Nexon also ensure that this is a system or a feature in the game for the full release. Right now, in its current state, I think that the game feels very bare bones, but I do think it's a good start. It's good to know that this is only an alpha and not a beta. I think that Defying Fate still needs a lot of time in the oven to continue to cook. The combat system is a good start, though I can imagine that fans of the original might not be too pleased with the change of the combat system here. That being said, while it's a good start, it certainly does need just an extra layer of depth there. Most of the time, you're always just comfortable performing the same abilities and same combo strings. I'm definitely terrified to learn about how Nexon are going to approach the microtransaction side of this game, because if it's like any of their other titles, then it means they're going to try and milk their consumers for as much money as humanly possible. However, I do think that Defying Fate has some potential here, but I'm not putting all of my eggs in one basket, only because it is coming from Nexon. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this game. Okay guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video. Be sure to slippity slap that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. As always, a big thank you to my wonderful patrons. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and we'll talk again real soon.